Hello, my name is Matthew Allen, and in this video I'm going to talk about ways to guide your readers. Specifically, I'll be discussing transition, signal, and signpost language in academic writing. So the learning objectives for the presentation are to help you be able to recognize signal words and phrases, to incorporate signal words and phrases into your writing, and to be able to consider structural relationships in your writing more carefully. So one of the problems that writers face very often is it's difficult to establish clear and meaningful relationships among the ideas that you're presenting to your readers. So the goal is to help your readers easily understand the relationships that you understand. So one way to help your readers to see things the way you see them is by using what we're going to call transition and signpost language to guide your readers and to direct your readers. For example, when you as a writer are shifting different times or different places, or when you're setting up, developing, challenging, or summarizing a set of ideas. So let's use an analogy or a comparison to help us think about this. When we're writing a paper, it's like we're building a road system that we want our readers to drive down. So the goal is to help them get to their destination efficiently without getting lost. So just as when we're on a road, when traffic situations are complex, we want to provide signs to our readers. And just like good drivers use turn signals to indicate to other drivers what they intend to do, moving left or right, slowing down, good writers use language to indicate to their readers what they're going to do. So we'll look at two functions, two moves, or two actions, two types of actions, we'll say, that academic writers often do. The first function is to use brief words and phrases as road signs. So as this image shows, there are many different kinds of road signs that we might encounter when we're in the world, driving through a city or through a highway or in the country. So these are some sample road signs for stopping and yielding. So each of these signs is a single physical object that a road designer puts in a place to give information to a driver. And in much the same way, writers can choose words or phrases that they can move around in their paper. So this is not a very creative way of writing because these are kind of fixed pieces of language. So the key is knowing what the different road signs are, or what the different writing signs, the signal language, we'll call them signpost or signal language, knowing what they are and knowing where to put them. So now let's look at a collection of these signposting language terms or expressions that we use in writing. So on the left side of this table, we see different functions, different types of logic that a writer might want to communicate to their reader. So for example, then the first one, if a writer is changing how they're going to refer to time, they might use a phrase like afterward, later, or earlier, formerly, so to indicate something happened before or after. We might provide examples by using such phrases as for instance, for example, for one thing. Writers often indicate contrast with phrases like however, on the other hand, sequence, first, second, next, finally, things like that. So there are many different functions, and there are even more possible words and phrases that we can use. So as I mentioned just a moment ago, this is not a very creative act, and that's fine. That is the point, is these are symbolic. Most of these are kind of idiomatic. They're difficult to figure out what they mean. So expressions like henceforth or Furthermore, we don't really want to stop and think about what each of these means. We want to be able to recognize them very quickly. So on the right-hand side, we have a few notes about using these or where they go in our sentence or in our paragraphs. So because the point of these signs is to the signpost language, the point of them is to guide our readers. We want to put them in places that our readers will notice. So therefore, we often put them at the beginning of paragraphs, sentences, or clauses. The purpose is to point the reader's attention in a specific direction in the text. So we might point backwards to a previous sentence or a previous paragraph, or we might point forwards to a following clause or sentence, or sometimes we do both. So with something like similarly, we might be kind of indicating a relationship backwards and forwards to make a comparison, or to indicate shared qualities. So here's an example. So I encourage you to pause the video and to look at these 4 sentences for structure and function and trying to identify the signal words and phrases. Each sentence has one word or phrase, and to explain what function or what purpose those signpost words use. So again, look at towards the beginning of the sentences and see if you can figure out what they mean. So here are the answers. So each sentence has one word or one phrase, and then an explanation of what those mean. So moreover is indicating that there's an additional reason why, for instance, shows an example. So I'll let you pause the video and review these. In this example, we can go a little bit deeper and more complex. This is a selection from a published research study about statistics. It comes from a statistics journal. And I've underlined in red several signposting language. So in this selection, it starts with given this fact. That would be pointing backwards to whatever fact the writers just talked about. The next paragraph starts with however, which is making a comparison, and then later in that sentence there's another signpost hence, which indicates a logical sequence, and that's setting up the second clause in that particular sentence. We see later specifically then is used a few times, and then in the very last sentence it begins as mentioned above, so that's pointing backwards. So here's an example of how these writers use signposting language in these 3 paragraphs. So we can see it usually happens at the beginning of a sentence. There are a few examples in most of these paragraphs, 1 or more in each paragraph. So that sets up this question of how many signs do we or should we use? As a reader, my advice is that you should try to learn what all of these transition and signpost language, what they all mean, so that you can read more quickly and read more efficiently. As a writer, I think it's more practical to say that you should identify the most important functions and learn a few of the words and phrases that go with those. Again, you're not going to be very creative. You're usually not going to change or alter these words like however, nevertheless, moreover, for instance. You just need to learn them and understand how they function. Okay, so let's move on to the second function. And this is in dealing with longer text, so usually sentences or paragraphs. I'll let you pause the video and read this slide, but the point at the bottom in gold, having a map that gives us the big picture of the structure or organization is very helpful because it helps the readers see the big picture and know what to expect. And so a map, when we look at writing, is going to be something like this. This is the same article, but if we notice here, we're not looking at underlined words, we're actually looking at entire sentences, entire paragraphs really. So these These two paragraphs came from the end of the introduction section. I'll let you pause the video and read these, but notice that the authors are using subjects like we and section 2. They're talking about the choices as authors and the different parts of the paper. So you might be asking yourself, well, do I need to include a roadmap in my paper? And the answer is, well, it depends. It depends on a lot of things. What kind of paper are you writing? And what kind of information are you providing? So here are 3 questions that you can ask yourself. The first is, will your reader or some of your readers get lost? And if you think your readers might get lost because you have a very long paper or you're presenting a lot of complex ideas, then it might be a good idea to include a roadmap, 1 or 2 paragraphs. The second question you can ask is if you, the writer, will get lost in your process of drafting. So if you're taking on a complex paper or a new type of paper or a challenging topic, I think it's a good idea to write a roadmap. You can do this as a form of reverse outlining. So instead of starting with an outline, you can draft your paper and then go through, once you have a first or second draft, create an outline, make some changes, and then write that up as a map to yourself. You might not include it in your paper, but it will help you, that process of organizing will help you be more clear in your own presentation of information. All right, and the third question, are other parts of your writing very strong? If yes, if you have a very strong focus, very strong organization, very strong development, good flow or good movement of ideas, strong use of rhetorical functions, if you do all of these things well, then your road itself might be so clear that readers can't get lost. They're going to follow your ideas throughout the paper. So in that case, there might not be a strong need for a map. And then this is our final slide, and it's an important one. So let's say we want to create a roadmap in your paper. These are just some practical strategies to help you articulate or put into words the most important ideas about your paper. So these are the things that you want to explain to your reader to give them the big picture or the key ideas or the focus. So at the paragraph level, we could do it as a topic sentence. And so this is a template where you would fill in the blank or really finish this idea. So you would not actually write these 7 words in your paper, but you would use them to prompt your thinking. So in this paragraph, I want to show that fill in the blank. Whatever goes in that blank becomes your topic sentence. That's the sentence that focuses your reader or kind of says, here's the map for this paragraph. Similarly, we could make sure for our entire paper that we have a clear purpose or clear destination. And that really takes us to our map. Kind of fill in the blank here. Once you know your purpose or your destination, here's how I will show this in my paper. And that's where we would go back and think about some of the logical language. Are you going to use sequencing language, first, second, third? Are you going to use causal language because of this, then therefore this? Or maybe conditional language, if this happens, then this happens. And then practically speaking, maps usually come at the beginning of a paper, although at the end of the introduction, or they can come at the beginning of a section. So that's the end of this presentation. Throughout the course on the website and in the course materials, you can find some additional information. But hopefully this gives you some basic information about these 2 really important functions. The first being signposting language, these pieces of language that we stick into our paper at different spots to keep our readers pointed in one direction. And then the second function, which is providing a roadmap. And that's something that we very carefully write to give an outline for our entire paper. And then we usually put that at the beginning of our paper in the introduction, or maybe at the beginning of a chapter or a new section in the middle of our paper. Sometimes people will put a summary of their paper in the conclusion. So it's kind of a roadmap at the end of the journey. So in this paper, I have shown you first, and then I showed you this, and finally we argued this. Personally, I don't find that kind of map very helpful because it comes so late in the paper. It feels either repetitive because I've already gone through the entire paper and I don't need a map, or it feels that it's too little, too late because I figured it out or I spent too much time being lost in the paper. That I would prefer as a reader to have a map at the beginning. So that's my advice on that point. Good luck, and I hope these ideas about transition language or signposting language and functional roadmaps, I hope they can help you write more clearly.